We're live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Vitalogy podcast, brought to you by Emmanuel Faith. Ryan,
it is
hello.
good to be back with you, Josh.
It is good to be here.
Yes.
Here we are. Now, if you're listening to us on the podcast, you don't care what day it is live, but we're on a new day, a different day, not new. Schedules change.
They do, and we are both a part of our kids' baseball teams.
Yes, we are.
And they happen to be playing on Wednesdays.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Did your kids? Did you have two games? Yesterday?
We had two games at the same time yesterday.
Same time.
So,
oh boy.
yes.
How'd they do?
They both did well. They're having a really good time playing baseball, which is fun. My youngest, Reed, is like this year, he finally decided he likes baseball and he's like good. And Ethan always has. So it's a blast.
I love it.
It's a blast.
I love it. My Josiah, he did really well. The team lost at the very end. It was a close game. They played well. But Josiah was up. It was the final inning. Okay. So they only played 5 innings. This was the last one. There was 2 outs and he gets up.
Nice.
And as a good dad, I'm just praying, oh Lord, please, I pray he does not strike out. Okay?
Just make contact.
Contact would be great. A walk would be great.
Yeah.
Those were the things I was praying for as the first strike came. As the second pitch came, he got hit by the pitch.
There you go.
Well, that wasn't what I was praying for, but
Lord, that'll work.
But thank you, Lord. That is answer to prayer because he did not lose the game.
That is awesome. I love that.
He ended up coming in and scoring, which was fun. So
that's great, man. That's great. Yeah, it's fun to be out there.
I know it is. I know. And so thank you for flexing with us. And if you're joining us, if you're logging on, it's not a normal time. And so share it. So invite some people to come and join in. We'd love to interact. Yeah. And yet we have a bunch of great things to talk about today.
I think so. Yeah, we do.
In fact, we've been kind of tossing out some questions, or tossing out some soliciting questions, I guess we've been doing, and kind of seeing what kind of questions are out there. And a really great one came in from Instagram. Right?
Yeah. This was last week. I didn't see it until after, so I was bummed. But yeah, so the question was, it was just sort of a fun question. What's the best backpacking trail you've ever been on? And so I'm going to give actually 3 answers to that. So the best backpacking trip I've ever been on was the one I met my wife on. And so we had known each other before then, but we fell in love on a trail called Oh Be Joyful Trail in Crested Butte, Colorado.
That's perfect.
So, Oh Be Joyful. And we thought, let's go be so joyful together for the rest of our life. Yeah. So that's my favorite trip. My favorite trail is right near there. It's called West Elk Loop. And there's this rock formation called the Castles that look like little drip castles that somebody made that are just unbelievably gorgeous. And I like it because there's not a ton of people on that trail. Yeah. It's pretty. I love that. It's wilderness, and so you could go a week without seeing anybody out there, but the scenery's gorgeous, tons of animals, and it's just a blast. So yeah,
that's great.
I also took my son Ethan on a backpacking trip this summer, and that was a fun trip too. Anyway, love being outdoors.
Cool. Yeah. I know. I do too. This is I wish I did more. I've gone once with my son Caleb, but it's just been too long already. We need to get back out there. I guess I'm gonna go with 3 also. Two of them are in the same place because I love it so much. But the one that is the best trip that I've ever been on was a Young Life trip.
Right.
There's this camp in it's actually in Canada called Malibu.
You went to Beyond?
I went beyond Malibu.
Get out of town.
Did. Oh my goodness.
How did I never know that?
Yes, I did. I know. It was amazing. So you're in this spot that is just gorgeous. You have to take a boat to get there to the camp. And then we had to take a boat to get to the trailhead. So we started at sea level and we went up like 6,000 feet to snow. So you start at sea level, go up to snow. We didn't see a soul. In fact, up there, you can drink water right out of the streams.
Yeah, it's that. For those who don't know, Young Life backpacking is awesome. I guided for Young Life for 4 years, and Beyond Malibu is like the trip everybody talks about. So Bravo, Josh.
I
My
know,
goodness.
I know.
I'm
Well,
jealous.
We should probably get you out there.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. That is the most beautiful. That trip was influential in my life and where I am today. That's a whole nother story. But then, actually, I'm going to just combine these into one because I've done this trip multiple times. But there's a spot in between June Lake and Mammoth.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where there's a specific spot that is my favorite backpacking place. It might be one of my favorite places on earth. It's this place called Island Pass. And you'd have to look it up, but it is this incredible place where you go kind of above the tree line, and you're at the top, and there's these little pools of water that are there that are just beautiful to look at, and you see, I mean, you can just see forever. It is gorgeous. It's
Island Pass.
It's called Island Pass.
Do you look down on Thousand Islands Lake?
You do, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's right above
I've
that.
been in that area. I didn't make it there, but
you kind of have to go a little bit out of the way to get to Island Pass. And it's right in Ansel Adams Wilderness.
That's beautiful.
So it's just gorgeous, right, real close to Yosemite. Right on. It is the best.
Very cool.
And I have to mention, I took 30 kids there once.
Wow.
30 junior high kids.
I don't even know if that's legal.
It is not.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a whole nother story. And I don't know what the statute of limitations is on that. So I'm going to keep that to myself right now.
We'll edit that out.
Just kidding. Oh, man. Well, hey, thank you for the questions. In fact, we'd love to answer anything you got. And clearly, if we'll talk backpacking, and we will talk backpacking for a long time.
We could,
if you'd like.
We could.
I don't think that's necessarily why you went. See, Amber knows you went to Beyond Malibu. Did not know that Josh Rose. All right. Well,
Neither did I.
Amber.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Loved it. So, hey, we've got a bunch to talk about today. Okay,
let's do it.
And in this podcast, we're often referencing sermons that you can find on another Emmanuel Faith podcast that is our sermon podcast.
Yep.
And I highly recommend that you go back and listen to this last week's message. These last six now. This was the sixth message.
Yep.
In this series have been foundational. They've been just great messages. This week, Ryan, tell us a little bit about your main idea.
Yeah, we did a message on the Great Commission, which is a famous passage out of the end of Matthew's gospel, where it's Jesus giving his disciples their marching orders. And the marching orders are go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them and teaching them to obey all that I've commanded, and lo, I'm with you always to the end of the age. And so we wanted to sort of frame this message for people to answer the question, what do we, in order to be a disciple, we want to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do as Jesus did. And this was part one of what did Jesus do, right? Jesus made disciples. And so his calling for us is to make disciples also.
And now you mean by us, you mean like the paid professionals?
Yeah.
Like us. Like us. Is that what you mean? Like
actually, no, like one of my, thank you that's a softball.
You like that? You like that?
Yeah. One of my main points this weekend was actually, this message is for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not for only for pastors, and it's certainly not only for missionaries. And I think that's the way that a lot of people often read the Great Commission is they read the Great Commission and they hear the command go, right? Go. And I wanted to just go back to the original, the Greek, to say, actually, there's only one command in the Great Commission, and it's not go. Yeah. It's make disciples that teach people how to live in the way of Jesus, with the heart of Jesus, to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to do as Jesus did. Like, that's the Great Commission. It's not go. And I do think that maintaining or trying to maintain that go is a command actually the logic of that breaks down.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Here's my, so what do you do if you read the Great Commission and you live in Iran?
So you, as a Christian, you are one of the few Christians in
Very
Iran.
few.
I know. I think they know that it's.
Well, actually, it's one of the fastest growing church multiplication movements in the world right now.
Yes.
But you're right. It's
but
traditionally
quite small.
Very small, right? So where should somebody who comes to faith in Jesus in Iran, where should they go?
America. Oh, is that
Like,
wrong?
please
No.
don't, right? Like,
No, please. We've got enough disciples, is what
stay.
you're saying.
What I'm saying
Huh.
is, if we read it as a command, it should be a command for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet the logic of that is not sustainable. The logic of that
Yeah.
breaks down pretty quickly. And luckily for us, that isn't the logic of the Great Commission. The logic of the Great Commission is, as you go, wherever you go, when you go, make disciples. Right.
Yeah.
And so if that means going across the street, or if that means going across the world, regardless of where you're going, you know what you're supposed to be doing as you go.
I like that. I feel like that would be a neat challenge to the right people group, right? In the right place, is that to change that, as if Jesus might say, stay.
Yeah.
Like, because actually in a lot of those, a lot of the same countries end up dealing with economies where they can't sustain and they need to leave. In fact, we ran into this a lot when we were going to Albania. Their best and brightest would get a ticket out, right?
Okay.
And they'd get to come to the United States. But I ran into a number of people who were disciple makers, and they were committed to Albania, even though they could have gone.
Right.
It's as if what you're saying is they were hearing that as Jesus telling them, stay and make disciples. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there are applications for us too, right? And I think the application for us is, even if God doesn't call us to go across the world, we're not off the hook. He's still calling us to make disciples. Yeah. And to make disciples of Jesus specifically, because one of the other points I made was, like, we are all becoming disciples of someone or something. That's part of our nature, is to be learners and people that are being shaped and formed by some narrative, by the world that we live in, by the voices we're listening to. We're all becoming disciples of something. The Great Commission is a call to make disciples of Jesus and to leverage whatever influence we have in our life to do that. To do that. So,
and so this week was all about inviting everybody on that journey, all of us, to join in, as you put it, God's mission by making disciples.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and I do think that Jesus's Great Commission is simply carry on what I've been doing. So as we look at the Great Commission, we're going, okay, well, yeah, Jesus, that is what you've been doing. You have been, you're going, right? As you're going, you're on the move. You're baptizing people, you're calling people to faith, and you're calling them to associate with you and to carry your name, as it were, have allegiance to you. And then finally, you were teaching your disciples how to obey. And so we get to carry Jesus hands us the baton and says, you get to run this leg of the race.
Yeah. Now, interesting. I don't see Jesus dunking many people in the water.
No.
And
that's why I wanted to say, okay, that there's a calling to faith that precedes baptism that I think Jesus has in mind as he talks about the ritual of baptism.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a bit broader.
I think
than
so.
Just
the act, or the what if you want to call it, the sacrament or whatever.
Yeah. So do you think he's getting at some of that identity piece that they're when they were baptized, especially early on, that was when you become a Christian, you don't all of a sudden look different,
right?
you don't all of a sudden wear different clothes, and yet this was the first outward thing that they did.
It was
something that was fairly quick after a conversion.
Sometimes
presumably it seemed like they're, and at times, they were kind of marking themselves.
They were.
In fact, you could get killed if you were found out
many did
you got baptized. Right.
I would say that there's three things that baptism it sort of encompasses. One, a new allegiance, so Jesus is Lord. Second is a new identity or a new lifestyle, so there's this new way that we live it out. And then finally, a new family. So baptism was really the entrance into the life of the church. So actually, can I nerd out for just a second?
Please.
There's
Please. We love
there's
that.
this
Will you guys allow that?
great book called The Patient Ferment of the Church. And I know it doesn't sound like
Ferment.
nobody's going, wow, I was really hoping they'd write a book that. Author named Alan Kreider writes about the history of the early church, and it is fascinating. It is so good. But he writes about the process of people getting to the point of baptism.
Yeah.
And so certainly in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, we see people like the Ethiopian eunuch who comes to faith in Jesus and is baptized right away. And so there's something to be said for that. In the early church, though, they had a catechism, or a catechesis process that lasted sometimes up to 2 years.
Wow.
And so part of the process was people needed to find a sponsor. They needed to find somebody within the church that would vouch for them to say, like, okay, Josh really is learning the way of Jesus. He really is practicing the way of Jesus. I've seen growth in him. And you needed somebody within to sort of vouch for your growing character. Well, that eventually would lead up to the point of baptism. And oftentimes the early church early-ish, I'm not using that in a capital E, church, would celebrate baptisms on Easter Sunday. And so and you can go back and read about this. This is in the Didache. So this is a document dated roughly 120-ish. Okay. They looked for a number of things when they were looking for water. Number one, they wanted running water for baptism. Number two, they wanted cold water for baptism.
Really?
Number three, the participant would fast for 3 days leading up to baptism. And number four, I don't think this is part of the Didache, but this was part of Kreider's research. Oftentimes they would be baptized naked.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I am not for practicing baptism in the same way that the early church did,
Just to be clear.
But baptism, while we didn't see Jesus dunking a lot of people, baptism was really, really important to the early church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
I've heard similar stories like this, and I don't know if I believe I heard this came from Justin Martyr. So not far off from then. Maybe the same idea that people would actually come to the waters in their old clothes, and they would disrobe.
Yes.
And it's as if they're taking off their old identity. This is who they used to be. And then as they came out of the waters, the rest of the church would clothe them in a new white robe.
I love that picture.
I love it. And what he says is people would wear those clothes without taking them off for months.
Yeah.
Because they were just so excited to say, I have a new identity.
I love that. I mean, it reminds me of Colossians chapter 3, right? Put to death, therefore, or put off what is earthly in you. And then later on in verse 12, put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved. Yeah, that put off and put on is symbolic in baptism. I love that. And then you see the picture of the new community, right? The new family, new allegiance, new life, new identity, and new family.
Yeah, coming together. I love that. And so here Jesus is saying, go and make disciples. Okay, so there's this going.
Yep.
Okay, there's baptizing, and what we do when we go. Baptizing is one of them. Teaching, is another one.
Yeah.
Now, but by the way, and back to you mentioned this, and I think this before we go into teaching, I think this is a big one. This is continuing what Jesus started. This is the part that always intrigues me about this, because this is the moment when Jesus declares in front of everybody, and as you pointed out, this happens very soon after his resurrection, very soon after the time at which we would say he was glorified on the cross, right? And that he was proven to be king, proven to be Lord, all these things. He's glorified. He declares he has all power.
Yeah.
All power and all authority. Okay. So there's no authority or no power that exists that is not his.
Right.
In some way, specifically, uniquely at that moment, right?
Yep.
And yet he says, therefore, you people
all
go and make disciples, right? Not I have authority and now I'm going to fix it all.
Yeah, no,
right?
Which would
have been nice. No.
I mean, listen, it's what the disciples we're still hoping for
That's
in the book of
right.
Acts. They're
That's
going, are you
right.
going to set up your kingdom now?
Yeah.
And they're thinking, are the heads going to roll? Is Caesar going to be dethroned?
Yes.
Are you finally going to elevate Israel to its place in this earthly world that it rightfully deserves?
That's right. Because even in the Garden of Gethsemane, they had swords.
Yeah.
They were like ready to fight.
They're ready.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's sort of this like turn of events, right? Where you imagine the disciples going, oh yeah, finally. Even like I imagine like Peter, James, and John, who saw Jesus at the Mount of Transfiguration, like looking at the other guys going, you're gonna love this. You are gonna love what you're about to see, because you guys, it's unbelievable. And then Jesus goes, you're going. And they're like, never mind, I didn't see that coming, right? Like, I didn't think that's where he was going with this. I thought he was going so Transfiguration style on us, and
yeah, that's true.
So
that's true. And so he tells us to go and give people a new identity.
Yep.
In baptism.
Call them to faith. And then teach them. Right.
Teach them. Okay. Yeah.
So here's the fascinating thing when I was studying this passage, Josh, because I wanted to just go try my best to go to a passage I've read 1,000 times with fresh eyes. Right.
Yeah.
And this was one of the things that stood out to me, was Jesus tells them the content that he wants them to teach in order to make disciples. And I was surprised once again to see, okay, so Jesus doesn't say, go teach people the Bible.
Well, what does he want us to teach them? You're right. He doesn't. He says, go
teach them to observe what I have commanded you. Okay. And now, certainly, now we have a lot of that, or at least some of that content in the Bible, right? So if we're going to apply this to our lives today, we would apply it using New Testament scripture primarily. But how would they have applied it? I mean, they're not going back, and certainly they were students of the scripture, and some of them probably had copies of the scriptures.
Yeah.
But Jesus says, go teach them what I commanded you. And so that's where I tried to sort of play with our congregation a little bit to go, wouldn't it be nice if we knew what Jesus thought the greatest commandments were?
Yeah.
What we want, like, what would he want us to teach and value above all else? And obviously we have what he would say is the greatest commandment. And so I think one of the greatest applications to teach them to observe all that I've commanded you is Jesus's commentary on the greatest commandment.
Yeah. Because that's really his command. I mean, these commands, that's what he taught us to do.
I would argue Jesus has a command, and then there's a lot of commentary and application of that one command in different contexts with different kinds of people. But I think. So the one command is love. Okay.
Yeah.
Love. And even Jesus, after washing his disciples' feet, says, a new command I give you, that you would love one another just as I have loved you. And so I think even like, as we read through the Sermon on the Mount, like, for example, take the first thing that Jesus addresses as far as our character, which is anger. I think that's commentary on what it looks like to be a loving person. I think being honest is commentary on what does it look like to be a loving person. And so certainly love is a huge category, which is why we need a lot of ways to tease it out and to apply it in different contexts. But I don't know that Jesus gets beyond that. I think he goes deeper and deeper into it.
Yeah. I mean, he does say that, I mean, more or less what he's saying is that whole book, okay, the part that they read, right? The Bible Jesus read, which is a slightly different Bible than we read,
right?
Because it's the first part of it, right? It's the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, we call it. That the law and the prophets is kind of a way of summing up that, right?
Yeah.
And he says all
of this depends or hangs on this one command.
So if you get that, you're gonna get the whole book,
right?
If you're really getting the whole book, then you should be getting that. Oh yeah,
that's a good way to put it. I like that a lot. Yeah,
I just made it up.
Good.
Right. Just kidding.
That'll preach. Yeah, and you know what's interesting is that the Apostle Paul picks up on this too. Obviously, he's inspired by the same Spirit. And so here's what he says in verse 8 of Romans chapter 13. He says, and I'll read 8 and 9. He says, "Oh, no one anything except love, except to love each other. For the one who loves one another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Now, what Paul did was to take the part of the 10 commandments and say, actually, these are just commentary. These are just applications of one. And he goes, that command is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
So Paul, I mean, I don't want to say it too strongly. I don't know that he discounts the 10 commandments, but he certainly does say that they are subsidiary to this one commandment, love. Love your neighbor.
He places them under a greater command.
Under a greater command.
Yeah. So they're still valuable, but all that we learn in the Old Testament, I mean, the New Testament places that under Jesus.
Right.
And so that which they do that. We're not saying that. We're not saying, you know, it's the Bible that actually says
the Bible's commentary on the Bible would say this is the command that's above all the others. And I think that's worth listening to. and so these are the commandments, right, that talked about our interactions with each other within the 10 commandments. Now, there are also parts of the 10 commandments that talk about our interaction with God. And I would simply say that those are the love God, right? Have no other idols before me. You shall have no gods before me, right? That's what it looks like to love God. And then this is what it looks like to love people. So, so I made the statement on this weekend that it's impossible to become a disciple without becoming a person of love.
Yeah, I wrote it down word for word. And I think I love the way you said it. I said, if we don't teach people to love, we don't teach people to be a disciple.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to say it. That what our job is in making disciples is to be creating people that love God and love people. It's interesting. I met with one of our older saints earlier today, and it was Virginia.
Oh, yes,
Virginia. She's not listening, but maybe she will one day. Virginia, we love you. And actually, it was interesting. She wanted to talk about love. And I just said, okay, let's talk about love. And I love Virginia. She's kind of at that point in her age where she'll kind of get an idea and then move to something else and then come back. Bless her heart. But she just said, love. She said this: God is love. Oh, no, sorry, excuse me. She says, what is love? God is love. What does that mean about God? And like, what love is what God is what she's saying. And so what is that telling us about who God is? And I think I just kind of listened and was like, yeah, I wrote that down. And then I thought, that is interesting. And here I knew we were going to talk about love.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
That this fact that God is love, here's why I bring this up here, because God's command then to us is to love God and to love others.
Yeah.
It's what he's saying is kind of be like me. Totally. Because if God is, his motivation is love. He loves us. And his reason for creation was us. His reason for Jesus was love.
Yeah.
That he's saying, hey, love also.
Right.
And there's only two things to love.
Him,
God, and
people,
others, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in like that for me helps frame discipleship. So as I'm discipling people, as I'm teaching scripture, as I'm meeting with people, as like one of my goals is to help them move more and more to become people of love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. And yet, love gets a bad rap.
Tell me more about that.
It does, and I mean, everybody. This is going to be a profound statement. Everybody loves love,
Yes, that's true.
right? And yet, it gets a bad rap in. I want to say even in like theology terms that, even Christian circles, that if you talk too much about love, then that's kind of,
I see what you're saying.
I don't know. It's kind of like you're not dealing with the real hard things.
Yeah.
And the tough things. And I guess, I mean, Jesus, I'm sure Jesus would have known that.
Yeah.
And if I love, what is it? Dallas is saying, if Jesus would have known a better way, right?
Yeah. In trying to help reframe the way we think about Jesus, Willard argues Jesus is brilliant, right?
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
don't have to talk about him that way. And he says, listen, if Jesus knew a better way to do it, he would have been all for it. Right? Like if he knew of a better way to deal with your anger, he would have been all for it.
Yeah.
And then Willard will sort of say tongue in cheek, anything you can do angry, you can do better not angry. That's like, yes.
It's true. Sorry. It's true. And so you can do better with love.
Yes.
That love
that would
makes
be the
it
same.
better.
Yeah. That same application point. I totally agree. Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
so
man. That's interesting. I love that. I love that. Love. Anyway.
Yes.
So okay, now can I bring us back before we move on? Because we've had some questions come in.
Great.
One about discipling and one about baptism. First thing is just I think is a helpful question. Is back in the day, Bill Williams, who's moved away. And I forget where, Bill, but
Bill's in Tennessee.
Tennessee, is it?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And there was a mentoring program at Emmanuel Faith. And here's the thing. We've often talked about mentoring as the discipleship tool. And it's a great option.
Oh, yeah.
We had
Phenomenal.
a program where we were, that was a big push for a while to try to get people mentoring. Now, it's not, I don't know that we do it like a program like that right now, as if we're, we have a mentoring ministry. However, I think if I could say what we're saying is we want to help people get into those relationships any way we can.
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you want to mentor, let us know.
I do know that our care and counseling department, that's a branch of what they're still pushing
good.
into.
Okay, great.
But yeah, and Josh, like you mentioned before, that we're going to do a class, sort of a training, so that any like our hope is that everybody that comes to Emmanuel Faith would feel comfortable and equipped to disciple somebody else.
Yeah.
Like that's one of my dreams, is that we have a church where if you want to learn how to be a disciple maker, we have pathways for you to do it. Whether it's with your kids or your grandkids or your neighbors or coworkers, that you go, oh, I can lead a study to help you become a disciple. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Yes.
So exactly. To that end, we have a class coming up.
In 2 weeks. And this is going to be, what we're trying to do is to really take the barriers down, because I think some people out there think that you've got to know a certain amount of things. You've got to have, a whole plan figured out, and you've got to have a book of curriculum and homework or something like that. And it's limiting people from taking that step of starting in a discipling relationship. And some of it is just, I'd love to, I just don't know what to do.
Right.
And so we're going to give a brief overview. Okay.
Yep.
We're talking an hour and a half of kind of just giving you an idea of what this looks like. Now, of course, there's always going to be more resources, and we're going to be offering some of those down the road, but I'm excited about this class.
Yeah, I am too, man.
We're going to give you a few tools of things to think about as you talk to somebody, but it's going to be really good.
Yeah. And even just a way to think about, if you have an hour-long meeting with somebody, what do you do during that hour?
Exactly.
Like, we want to help you answer that question. So you go, I know what to do. We're going to spend roughly 20 minutes doing this and 20 minutes doing that, and then 20 minutes here. And you have a framework in your mind that you can go into the meeting and go, gosh, God, I believe that you're inviting me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And B, I have a vision for what you're asking me to do here,
That's
and I
right.
can be successful. So that's why we're doing that.
Yeah, and that's going to
Yep.
be on Sunday the 28th, which happens to be Palm Sunday
Right on.
at noon.
Cool. Here
Here, yeah.
on the church campus. Right
I
on.
know.
Very cool.
Are
My
we
friend
doing
Carolyn,
good?
Carolyn chimed in and said,
Yeah.
how about First Corinthians as a description of love? Carolyn,
right.
yes. So my friend
Yes.
Carolyn, she uses First Corinthians as a way to pray over people.
No way.
And
really?
she uses the same thing. She does the same thing with Psalm 139.
Okay, First Corinthians.
13.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
the whole thing.
First Corinthians 13.
But that's okay. That's
And
great.
Ryan, would you help, or God, would you help Ryan to be more loving today, more patient today, more kind today, and so
what a good,
like her prayer is for me is that like I would become more and more a person of love. And so thank you for praying for me, Carolyn.
That is
and
really
for
cool.
the many others you pray for too. I love you.
That is really cool. That is really cool. So Gwen talks about Gwen is asking a question about baptism. She says this, I've known a lot of people who've rededicated their life to Christ after a season of walking away and have decided to be baptized a second time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So here are my thoughts, and they are simply that. Okay. So I was baptized as an infant in the Presbyterian Church. And when I came to faith in Jesus, I really had this sense, actually it was during seminary where I went, gosh, I want to profess my faith to the world. And I want to tell people that I'm a disciple of Jesus. And so I decided that I'd get baptized again for me as a believer.
Yeah.
And so I'm all for that. I think that there's something unique about saying as a believer, Jesus, I'm in and I'm following you.
Yeah.
I don't feel the same way about someone who's baptized as a believer and then recommits their life to Christ. And here's why. Because I think there's actually more power in recognizing, God, you didn't let go of me. Like, even though I let go of you, maybe, and even though I walked away, you kept pursuing me. And so pointing back to your believer's baptism, even in light of the journey away, I think there's a transcendent power in pointing back and saying, God, even though I let go of you, you never let go of me. And I'm so grateful for your sustaining grace and mercy in my life. And so I think that picture gets tainted a little bit if we say, yep, we want to baptize when we come back after a prodigal season. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. And I do think this is why we try as best we can to at least sit down with somebody before they get baptized. It's not like an interview, it's not like a test or anything like that, but at least kind of hear their story a little bit. In fact, just at our last baptism, 2 different people came to me with that same question. One of them, I just simply asked, hey, did you decide to get baptized when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Because they were baptized younger. And one of them said, yes, I chose to. I knew it. I understood it. And I got it. And so I told her that very thing. I said, well, you know what? Then I want to say you this is not, then don't get baptized again.
Yeah.
Just remember that.
Right.
The other person said more or less her dad made her do it. And so that's where I said, well, all right, then I think that this is appropriate.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
I think I'm 100% with you. And it's one of the reasons I've encouraged my kids to wait. And I know it sounds like a terrible thing, right? To tell my 10-year-old daughter who loves Jesus to wait.
Yeah.
But I don't ever want them to look back on it and think, well, my dad was a pastor, so I had to get baptized, but that wasn't really my decision. No, I wanted to be their decision. And so I'm just like, keep pushing her back. Like, just wait a little bit, sweetie, just wait a little bit. And, I mean, she is a disciple. She loves Jesus. She blows me away, but, I just want it to stick in her soul to go, this is my decision.
Yeah.
And I'm choosing to follow Jesus.
I like that. So I like that a lot. I like that a lot. That's great. Okay, well, thank you. I wanted to catch up with those questions. If you put them in there, we're gonna get to them. So sometimes you just have to stick around a little bit,
Yeah.
and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Okay, so now we've kind of talked through. We've talked through the message
Yeah.
here, and we're also on some waters that there's disagreement in the church, right? There's a lot of, there's people who would say all sorts of things about baptism,
There are.
and we would also say that while baptism is important, let me ask, what is the important thing about baptism? Because, like you said, there's some Presbyterians, which we love Presbyterians. We have Presbyterian friends.
Yeah.
They baptize infants only. They have reasons to do it, and
They do.
Yeah. I'd also say this: every single person on the spectrum, when you hear their reasons for it, you often go, oh, "Okay, I could see that." I don't agree, but as long as that's practiced, I feel like okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, we're saying this is one of the big things Jesus says.
Correct.
Right.
It's part of the Great Commission.
It's right. This is huge.
Right.
It's immensely important, and yet we can disagree that whether it's sprinkling or immersion, whether it's done as a child or as an adult, and I think everybody else is wrong. But just kidding. But I'm joking, and yet everyone, they think I'm wrong. So there's something that brings it all together, though. What is it that is central about it?
All right. Well, so here's what I would say. One, I do believe, I would say fairly strongly in a believer's baptism, and second, is baptism required for salvation? I would say no.
I would say no. Water,
correct.
Getting dunked or sprinkled,
right,
or whatever in water.
That symbol, that ritual, that sacrament, that is not required for salvation, right?
Okay.
That salvation is by faith alone in Christ alone, right? That is what is quote unquote saves us. That being said, I don't know that the first church would have been familiar with an unbaptized believer. I think that it would have been assumed. They were sort of part and parcel, that they went together as you profess faith in Jesus, and sometimes went through some sort of catechism and all that, whatever. Yeah. But as you profess faith in Jesus, then you also would be baptized. And so I do want to hold that out there to say that's a reality from the first century church. But yeah, no, baptism is merely a symbol of what's happened in our lives. And so we're buried with Christ in his death. And so in our sin, and we were raised to walk in newness of life. Yeah. And that by the work of the Spirit in us, by the work of Jesus on the cross, we are made new. And baptism is a picture of it. Like often people will say like a ring is a symbol of a marriage. Same type of a thing.
That is not the marriage.
This isn't the marriage.
No.
But it's a symbol of it.
And I'm glad it's not, because this is my third ring.
Okay, there you go.
So I'm glad that the ring is not
baptized 3 times. That's what I'm taking from this.
Yeah, no, I lost one of them. Anyway, I still am in trouble for that. But that's a great illustration. But here's the thing, that means that there is something, that is what baptism symbolizes, that identity piece, that we are now new, that we have been buried with Christ, we've risen with Christ, that we have a new family. You talk about that.
New allegiance, new identity, new family.
And it seems like the different traditions they all put that at least somehow into the picture, however they do it.
Yeah.
That's in there. And so that gets me to this idea that there's things that we disagree with a lot with let me say, I said that we disagree a lot with people. We disagree on certain things.
Yes.
But in the vast majority of Christians out there, if we really were to add up all the things we agree with and all the things we disagree with, the things we agree with are a lot more.
Right.
right? And yet it's those things that we disagree that oftentimes maybe a considerably small amount compared to the things we agree on are the things that separate us.
You're
And
right.
when those things, you could get in trouble for talking about in good ways those people or quoting people that that believe those things.
Is that possible?
Is it possible?
Yeah.
You
No,
tell
you're
me.
right. You're right, Josh. Yeah. Yeah. And even like, so yeah, like within Protestantism, there'd be certain disagreements amongst like people about baptism, certainly amongst Catholics, amongst Orthodox, that there's nuances and different ways that people do that. Yeah. That's been an interesting journey for me at Emmanuel Faith.
Okay.
And because there are a number of Catholic authors that I'll read that have had significant influence on my life. I think one of my favorite authors, his name is Henry Nouwen. And I just think God used him and spoke through him and just really encouraging. He's a Catholic author. And so, at Emmanuel Faith, I've quoted Catholic authors before and gotten people have sent me emails and had a pretty hard time with that. And so I think, for people to know, when I quote somebody, I am not endorsing everything that they've ever written. In fact, I'm not claiming that I've read everything that they've ever written.
That's a good point.
And in today's world, I don't know how you could claim that about anybody, really. I mean, I don't know how you would know that. But I think I'm in good company there. Because that's what the Apostle Paul did when he preached.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you read through Acts chapter 17, you see Paul at Mars Hill or at the Areopagus, and he quotes pagan poets in his sermon that made it into scripture.
Epictetus or
something like that. Yeah. And so he's not saying I agree with everything this person said. He's actually saying, in that context, I agree with this. We are all children of God, on some level, right? But he's not saying I fully endorse everything that they've ever written. And so when I quote somebody, I'm not saying I'm claiming to have read everything they've ever written. I'm not saying I agree with everything that I've read that they've written. I'm saying here's a quote that I think helps us wrestle with the text and the direction that we're going within the sermon. So I've quoted Sam Harris in sermons before. Right. I've quoted Christopher Hitchens in sermons before. I've quoted Madonna. I've quoted Lady Gaga. I mean, I've quoted a lot of
The Office.
I've quoted The Office. I try not to quote The Office as much as I'd really like to. I quote Dallas Willard a lot, and only some of those are actually in my notes. Other ones are just like oh gosh, it's too good not to say. And so, that I try to read widely. I know you do the same thing. And I try to read ecumenically. I try to read across sort of my denominational convictions to say, what can I learn from people outside of my world?
Yeah. And this, if I see anything, and not to say that I'm in this world also, but what we try to do is kind of look above a little bit and look at the way that trends in theology have moved. And so one of the things that it seems to me like there was a way that people defined themselves in theological terms was with what they were against, for a long time. And so they would only read. It was encouraged in seminaries, even. It sounds to me like it was encouraged to only read certain authors. Now, that's not the way that I was trained in seminary. Not the way that I think. I want to read everyone. Now it seems to be encouraged to kind of get a broader perspective, because when we're in a narrow perspective, when we're reading people that look like me, that think like me, and that agree with me, from America even, right? Or from my tradition, then they come with the same conclusions. And it's hard to get outside. And here's the problem. This book was not written by people that look like me, that think like me, that any of those things.
No way.
Very, very different.
I mean, their whole worldview was different. Their whole
Yes.
mindset was different.
Yes.
I mean, they're like we operate based on guilt and innocence in the West often, but primarily they would have operated from a very different point of view. I mean, they would have been going, well, it's not so much about guilt and innocence. It's about being a part of the community.
Yes.
It's about the term is slipping me right now. If you know it, you can jump in.
Communal? No,
Yeah,
not quite.
it's
Being a
that.
part of the
Yeah.
but
yes.
but that and here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that there's this variety of people, of expressions, of cultures, that each of those can highlight and pick up something
Totally,
a little bit
yes.
different. And when I read someone that has a different perspective, I go, oh, I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, to be very clear, there's many times when I think, oh, I've never thought of it that way. And I think, yeah, they're wrong.
Yeah. Oh,
and-
yeah.
and
And
yet-
I never thought about it that way because I don't think you should think about it that way. Right?
Yes, absolutely. That happens. And,
Honor, shame.
and sometimes
Honor, shame versus guilt and
Totally,
innocence.
totally.
Finally, I'm like,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. There it is.
Exactly. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. The fact is that in the same book, I can say, "Oh, you missed that," but wow, this is right on.
Yes.
And the fact that someone gets one part wrong doesn't mean that they're all wrong.
Totally.
And praise the Lord for that.
Yes.
Because I have been wrong. I don't know where it is.
Josh has been.
I had a professor.
Josh, how does that feel? I'm just kidding.
I had an epistemology professor, okay, philosophy class, and he got up and said, "I am wrong about some things," and we're like, "What?" And is the professor to say that, and he says, "As soon as you tell me where I'm wrong, I will then correct them, and I will no longer be wrong." So that his hope is, he's like, therefore I will never consistently be wrong.
Yes.
Because I'm going to be continually learning.
Yes.
And so,
well, and that's what, Dallas Willard said, reality is what you run into when you find out you're wrong. And so like this ability to say, okay, I was wrong and I'm going to change. I think I've just been so enriched. Like recently I've read books by a charismatic theologian. I've read books by two authors from the Greek Orthodox or the Orthodox tradition that have just been really, really challenging to me. And I read to learn, and learning either implies that you're being challenged with something you don't know yet, or you're having to rethink something you thought you knew and think about it differently. And so like the echo chamber of just reading people I agree with doesn't scratch the itch of learning. It just reinforces. Now there's a place for that. Like, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. If I write a book, I want you guys to buy it and read it. Right.
Yeah,
like, and you may agree with me on a lot of stuff, but I do think that there's a place for challenging ourselves. And even, I would argue, even within sermons, to say, okay, like, I don't agree with everything this person has written, but I agree with this part, and let's wrestle with this. This is good.
So wait. Okay. Now, does that apply to you?
That I might be wrong?
Yeah.
Yes.
That in a sermon, that if you're listening or to a podcast even currently, and people say, I love that, but I'm not so sure about that. That's okay.
100%.
That's good.
100%. And I invite that dialogue. I want that dialogue. I want us to be a church that wrestles with things, because the authority for me lies in the scripture and it lies in the spirit. And so let's wrestle with the text, right? Let's wrestle with God and what he's said. And so I invite that feedback and questions. Absolutely. I actually really love it.
Yeah. I know you do. I know. That's why I ask. And so that's I think that's really what this is all about. That's what we try to do on this podcast. And if you're listening, hopefully you understand the format, that this is a place to process, to think about it, to dialogue about it, to go a little deeper into it, and for you to to ask questions.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I love that.
You want to flash Danielle's question?
Yes,
Oh,
let's
Tim,
put it up.
honor shame. You came through for me, man.
Tim nailed it.
It was I didn't see it before it came to me, but you were there. And
I know.
And
Way to
I
go.
love it.
Way to
Yeah,
go.
the
So
best.
Danielle says this, and let's read it for our podcast listeners. The idea that baptism is merely a symbol picture of what's happening on the inside. Scripturally, where do we see that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the most prolific place we see it would be Romans chapter 6. And starting in verse 3, it reads like this. Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ?
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking about, Paul's talking about baptism that is not less than the act of going under the water, but certainly is more, right? That we're baptized into Christ. We're baptized into his death. We were therefore buried with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. And I would say that that's where baptism is. And I wouldn't actually say that it's merely a picture or a symbol, but that it is a picture or a symbol.
Yeah.
So there, and by not merely, I think there is something significant that does happen at baptism.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet there's because
I would argue though that there's something significant that happens at every sacrament that transcends just the symbol itself.
There you have it. You just said the sacrament with 3 minutes to go to leave, and that may have to wait till next time. You slipped in sacrament there, and I will refrain from bringing up. Okay, that's better. Just kidding. Because I hope I'm not reading into Danielle's question, but that merely basically what there's a lot of people who would say that baptism, they would maybe fall short from saying that it's necessary for salvation, but that it is it's right up there almost, right? It's super, super, super important.
Yes.
And so we don't want to disregard or, and maybe she heard us saying that, it's, you don't have to do it. So don't.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what you're saying,
right.
But how would you put it in those terms?
I would say that baptism is an invitation from Jesus to publicly declare that our allegiance is to him, and that in our obedience, Jesus meets us in unique ways. And I believe that even in the act of baptism, that there is symbolic nature to it. There's also a unique presence that Jesus gives to baptism. I would argue the same thing is true of communion, that as we take communion, that God's unique presence is with us in that moment, that is different than at other moments. So that's all that I'm saying. And is that clear?
Yeah, no, I think so. So.
I hope so.
And I know, this is it's a tricky one, because I do think there are extremes where people will push baptism so much that it seems like it's earning salvation.
Totally.
I know that's not what Danielle's saying. That's an extreme. And then there's other extremes that kind of disregard it altogether or don't talk about it.
Yeah.
The church that I grew up in, I don't know that they still do this, and I don't know if it was intentional at all, but throughout growing up throughout my high school experience, everywhere from childhood to high school, it was just not talked about. And I don't ever remember. In fact, I was in my 20s and I called my mom and said, "Mom, was I ever baptized?" I don't know. I was thinking to myself, did I get baptized as a kid? That's why they never talked about it. Maybe my church.
So were you?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I was not. And so it was actually, I was in ministry, and I literally called my mom. Mom, was I baptized as a child? Maybe as an infant or something like that. I don't know. And she's like, "No." And so sure enough, I got baptized, and then I turned around in the same pool and baptized some of my first students.
Oh, I love that.
Ministry.
What a great picture.
It was what
a great picture. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I think we should talk about this question before we close.
Oh, do we have one more?
The one that was sent in. No.
Oh
it's
my
on
goodness,
this
we
Google
didn't.
Doc. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Oh man, Anita. She said I can say her name.
Okay,
by the
good.
way, good.
I didn't wanna...
she said I could bring it up, and she said I could talk publicly about this. So, okay, we're gonna extend slightly because this is important. Anita, okay, we were talking, and she said this, and she said, please bring it up to Ryan. She said she just loves. She is one of these people that is committed. That is like, I mean, she's here, Sunday nights.
Yep.
And loves it. And really puts it into practice.
Yeah, she's living it out.
She's living this out. And it's cool to see. She says she loves how practical the sermons are and how there's always something that we can do. And yet, at the same time, this was her words to me. She said, but if Ryan gives me one more thing to do, I'm just done. I can't do anything else. And I thought, oh my goodness,
yes.
What a great statement.
Yes.
So it sounds like a criticism, but it's not. It was in a spirit of
no,
of
Anita, I am a type A person too. I feel you. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I don't know if you are too, but I feel that. I just want to say, like, yes. All right.
Tell me.
So let me give you just a few things. One, thanks for the question. I think it's a great question.
Yes.
Number two, I'm so glad people are taking steps to say, what would it look like for me to become a disciple that transcends ideas and actually goes into action? I think there's a challenge right now in our current just church model, current cultural moment. In a digital information age, we can learn more things and hear more things and trick ourselves into thinking we're becoming something different and actually doing something with the information that we have as we just listen more. Actually, there's something that your brain does when you're around information that tricks you into thinking you're actually doing something with it.
Yeah.
Rather than just hearing it and going, okay, now I need to make definitive steps to put this into action.
That's the story of a pastor's life.
It
could be. It could be.
Yeah, sure.
Not, but
sure. So a few things that I would keep in mind to Anita and me and others like us. Number one, this is all invitation.
Yeah.
All of it. And Jesus was the consummate inviter, right? Come follow me. To the rich young man, sell everything if you want to and follow me, but you can't follow me if you don't, right? It was an invitation. To Judas, go do what you're going to do. Do it quickly, right? Like, he doesn't try to talk him into it. It's all invitation. So I think the journey is trying to discern what Jesus's invitation uniquely is for us in this moment and in this season. And what I'm trying to do is give you tools that you can pull out and utilize at any time as you continue to grow and mature as a disciple. But like when I talked about different spiritual practices, my expectation or hope isn't that people try to do all of those week one or that they go, all right, now I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I just think pray about what the invitation is and try some of these and see which ones are life-giving in this season that you're in. And then know you have others to utilize in different seasons.
That's good. I had another conversation with another one of our members. I didn't give permission to say her name, but she was asking a similar question and actually wanting to put together a resource of really more or less asking a bunch of people, a subset of people, how they practice this, just to give people ideas to say,
I love
like,
that.
It's not every, you're not going to find people doing all these things.
No.
To be real honest about it and to say that this is what I'm doing right now. This is another thing that I could do, but and I think seeing these as in filling your library of these are resources that I have. I've got my resources, like love books, and I love having the right book at the right place that I can grab to answer a question or to look at something. And so these practices, these practical advice are not always things that we're going to say, like, okay, go do the whole bookshelf. Right. It's when I need this, I can pull this one out and go, this is a good practice for now.
And there may be times that there may be moments you can redeem also, right? Like if you wanted to start practicing silence, what if instead of turning on the radio when you get into the car and you're alone, what if you just said, okay, whenever I'm driving alone, I'm going to practice silence and I'm going to try to use and redeem this moment to commune with my Father. You know, so there's small things that you can do rather than total overhauls to your schedule. You can look at like, what are these moments within my day that I could redeem and that God could breathe new life into?
Yeah. I love it. And just at the point where it's getting too convicting to me, I'm going to end it. So, because we wouldn't want that at all. No, that's a great
I'm with
point.
you, Anita. I'm with you.
Well, everybody, thank you so much. And we do hope and pray that that was a great way to end, because this really is advice. It is ideas. It is biblical wisdom. And
it's invitation.
An invitation to live the life that God's designed you to live. That's what Vitalogy is all about, and we're trying to help you do that. And in the process, it's helping us. And
absolutely,
so, Ryan, I appreciate the conversation.
Josh, fun as always.
It is great. Thank you to everybody who has joined in. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. God bless.